it becomes a legitimate issue. From 2000 to 2008, unemployment in this country went up 81%. In the last 5 months, unemployment has gone down 23%. You know, I'll tell you one difference that Bob Gibbs has from George Bush's policies. He don't want you to know it, but he's gone on record with this. He believes in something called the fair tax. All right, the fair tax, it's one of those words that, frankly, I think is a misnomer. And unless, of course, you make more than $250,000 a year, because it's a matter of perspective. The fair tax basically represents a 23% sales tax on anything you buy. Buy a new house, 23%. Buy a gun, 23%. Buy an American flag, 23%. Buy a Bible, 23%. Buy a tractor, 23%. Virtually every economic study that's been done in America by any reputable economist will tell you that if you make less than $250,000 a year, you're going to be paying more in taxes under that archaic, regressive, and draconian formula. That's the only difference that I can see between Bob Gibbs' economic plans and the plans that were put forth by George Bush and that separated this country, or put this country where it is now. Having said all that, the Democrats don't have all the answers. Bill Clinton was in the White House when we passed NAFTA. NAFTA has been a disaster for this country. The trade with China has been a disaster for this country. Now, we've got to stop thinking about the extremes. We've got to stop talking about ideology and demagoguery and start talking about facts, getting things done, doing things right, and forget about the wealthy in this. Don't forget, they're important, but start worrying about the middle class, working families, children, seniors, veterans. That's the strength of this country. Not on Wall Street, not on the Pentagon, and not the halls of Congress.
I'm glad you're all excited about that. Let's review this a little bit. Since Zack's been visiting Congress this last year, he's voted to raise over $1.4 trillion in new taxes on families. He voted for 13 separate tax increases totaling $700 billion, H.R. 3962 on November 7, 2009. He voted for the cap and trade. That's $200 billion cost to families, the equivalent of 15% increase in personal income tax. I can go on and on about that. But I think it's interesting to note when he brings up the fair tax. You know, he doesn't tell you that the fair tax, if it's instituted right, we repeal the amendment that created the income tax. All taxes of the federal government go away, and so does the IRS. And it would bring in the fair tax, if it was done, it would bring in $2 trillion of the economy that doesn't pay taxes because of the underground cash economy. It would lower prices of products we buy because you would not have the cost of taxes and tax compliance in those products we buy. It would be a tax cut for every American, even the people on the lower end of the economic scale, because if you ever studied the fair tax, you would find out that you have a prepaid credit system for necessities of life. So, and it would do away, for me to support the fair tax, it would do away with the payroll tax, Social Security, and Medicare taxes, and it would replace all that. So even people that don't pay any income taxes because their income's so low, they still pay the 7.5% for Social Security and Medicare, so does their employer, so that keeps more money in those employers' pockets to invest in their businesses. It would bring capital, it would free up so much capital because it wouldn't be taxed. We need to move to stop taxing capital and income and tax and services consumption, because when you tax capital and income, you stifle economic growth because the government is taking more money out of the risk takers to invest that money. Trade, let's talk about trade. Hammers me on trade. Well, you know, this is interesting. The Department of Commerce's own figures in Ohio, 26% of Ohio manufacturing jobs are dependent on trade, exports. Agriculture is even more so. And it's also interesting to note that blast NAFTA, okay? Now, I'm for trade and fair trade, and it's a challenge to make trade work better and be more fair. But if NAFTA is so bad, why isn't the President of the United States, he has the authority to open up NAFTA for renegotiations? He's not doing it. He's not doing it because the statistics, the numbers don't show that. The reasons we've lost jobs to overseas is not because of trade policies. The reason is bad economic policies that he supported. And that was we had the second highest corporate income tax rate in the world, soon to be the highest because Japan's going to lower theirs, and we're raising ours because those bad companies out there. And the second reason is our regulatory compliance costs. And there was an interesting article about 3 weeks ago in the Wall Street Journal that said that one of every $3 dollars earned by corporate America, businesses, employers, go for taxes and regulatory compliance. That's why we've lost jobs, because businesses have to, we live in a global economy, like it or not, and businesses have to be able to compete and be able to stay in business. If they can't make a product to be competitive, they're out of business. And our congressman here in early September sponsored a bill with no co-sponsors called the VOTE Act, where he wants to make it a referendum, everybody have to vote in any trade agreements. So that he's putting up a protectionist, isolationist wall around this country by that kind of policy, and that will just get us in trouble. We will lose jobs. And you go talk to the employers, and I've talked to a lot of employers in the 18th Congressional District, and some will tell me if NAFTA were to go away, they would lose, they have to lay off anywhere from some of them 30% of their employees, some as high as 50%. So what we need to do in trade, two things. When a foreign government is subsidizing an industry or a sector, and those products come over here, we do need to slap a tariff on them and make a level playing field, because no American company, employers have to compete with the foreign government. And the second thing that gives me heartburn is China. China does not let their currency float. That gives them a huge competitive edge, okay? But the bottom goes, this goes back to the federal deficit spending. China's our banker. It's pretty hard to go to your banker and tell them to quit doing this. We can't negotiate with our banker anymore. And so the real problem in this country is spending, and they want to spend more and more and more. And I'll give you an example before I shut up. Here a few weeks ago, Nancy Pelosi called them back to spend another $26 billion. Now, Zack put out a press release, his daily press release, last day that I didn't support. He assumed Brian didn't, but he said it was deficit neutral. Here's how it's deficit neutral. $10 billion of that $26 billion, they're going to raise taxes on American companies that have to do business overseas. Bright idea. Second, that was sarcastic. Second, $16 billion of the $26 billion is they're going to cut food stamps in 4 years. Okay, well, I really don't believe they're going to do that. But think about that. That would be like one of us going out and buying a boat that we can't afford, so we find the money, we borrow the money, but we justify in our own minds because in 4 years from now we're going to spend less. That's the insanity that people are running this country. And what we need to do, they didn't pass the budget this year, they passed what they call CRs, continuing resolutions. Means that, well, we'll just keep the government running, we don't have a blueprint to know where we're going, but we're spending more money. So, and it just amazes me when they come out and say, the reason the stimulus hasn't worked is because it wasn't big enough. It's nearly $1 trillion, it wasn't big enough in a $15 trillion economy. I don't know what else to say, but I think you got the message there.